Want to learn a super easy way to make shaker cards that look amazing? I will show you every step and share all my card making tips with you. Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. In this video I will show you how to make 2 fun shaker cards for Christmas using the stars and Merry Christmas stencils, together with the party stamps by CarlaCreates. The party stamps are great for any occasion, not only for birthdays. VaessenCreative has released a brand new product and it is such a joy to try them out before their official launch. They will be available soon, so keep an eye on that. These are very smooth blending brushes, each with different tips and sizes. Don't they look awesome on your desk in that handy holder? And in this video you will see exactly how to use them. Let's begin with a card panel made from Florence Smooth White A6 watercolor paper. On top of that, the Merry Christmas stencil will be placed. This stencil can be used to create a beautiful background, but also to highlight a single text on the card. At this moment we will have to decide where the text Merry Christmas should go. To leave enough space at the bottom for other elements, it needs to be placed rather high on the card, centered but not all the way at the top. By aligning both the paper and the stencil with the grid lines on the work mat, the coloring will turn out perfectly straight. This is the one that will be colored. Once it's in place, it's attached to the work mat. This new Vaessen Creative mat is magnetic on both sides and heat resistant. The other side can even be used for cutting. Now the ink blending can begin. Especially with such a delicate stencil, blending with brushes is convenient and very pleasant. The set includes large and tiny brushes. It's great to have different sizes on hand. Starting with a small brush, Distress ink in the color Salty Ocean will be used for the first layer. Just lightly swipe the brush across the ink pad a few times. That is already enough to load the brush with ink. Now the ink can be applied very easily and precisely to the desired area. Because of the fine brush tip, there is no need to mask the areas around it. With careful blending, the coloring can go quite fast. It feels like applying some makeup, very smooth and satisfying. The tip of the taller brushes is slightly skewed, which makes it easier to blend in lines rather than circular motions, although both ways work fine. The text is applied quite thickly, as you can see. It won't stay this bright blue. This is just the base layer. To clean this delicate stencil, it is best to be very careful. Place it on a microfiber cloth and spray it lightly with water. Then dab gently with the cloth. Don't wipe, because that could damage the stencil. Just dabbing is enough. Once it's completely dry, place it back onto the card panel. Position it so that the blue text overlaps again, but also covers most of the paper. The lower part won't be covered, but that part will stay white anyway. The edges will also remain quite light later on. Now it's time to add ink with the largest brush. I chose this one because I will color a bigger area of the stencil. This stress oxide in lumberjack plate is used for this step. Only a tiny bit of ink is needed on the brush. Hold the brush by the sides to avoid pressing too hard. Start blending on top of the blue text using circular motions. Apply ink mainly to the center of the paper and make sure that the area where the first Merry Christmas text was placed becomes darker than the rest. Each time new ink is added to the brush, begin blending over the blue area again. That way the color transitions smoothly, darkest at the text and gradually fading to the light near the edges of the paper, almost white at the outer ends. Keep one side of the stencil in place so you can occasionally peek at the result. It might look like there isn't much ink on the paper, but once the stencil is lifted, The red will appear more vibrant than expected. The blue should no longer be visible, so add a little more red ink on top of it when needed. Let's continue with a second card and the star stencil. It is placed on the paper in a way that covers as much surface as possible. The lower part will stay white, so it doesn't matter if that part is covered by the magnetic ruler. With a large brush, the result becomes smooth faster, especially on a larger area. Using Salty Ocean Distress ink, the card panel is given a touch of color. Again, only a small amount of ink is picked up with the brush. You can see that the brush looks quite light. To avoid blotches of ink on the paper, the brush is first swirled on the work mat in small circles. This spreads the ink evenly into the bristles before applying it onto the stencil and paper. The center part will be darker and it will fade to lighter shades toward the edges. That is why blending starts in the middle of the paper, moving in circular motions to the sides. Hold the brush by the sides to apply as little pressure as possible. This background is intentionally kept light, so it won't become too dominant later on. Notice how the stars near the edges appear lighter? The work mat can be cleaned quickly with just water and a cloth. Also on this card, a Merry Christmas text will be added. But now I will show you how to blend a small space with a larger brush. The text stencil is placed near the top and centered on the paper. By masking off the parts you don't want to color with tape, it is possible to use any brush size you like. If you plan to use this stencil often, you could even create your own masking stencil. You can find how to do that in one of my other videos. The link is in the top right corner or in the description below. Again, lumberjack plate distress oxide is used, just like before. A fairly thick layer of ink is applied over the masked text area. The blending now goes right over the light blue stars. Because the stars are so light and because the oxide ink is opaque, they will no longer be visible once this layer is done. On the previous card, the blue text was quite dark, so it remained visible under the red ink. These are the two card panels that are now finished and can dry for a while. In the meantime, it is time to stamp and heat emboss the cute images. For stamping, VersaFine ink is used. This ink gives the sharpest impressions in one go. The stamping part has been slightly sped up, but it's easy to see how even pressure is applied before lifting the stamp. A gift box, a cat, a dog and 4 little paws are stamped. 2 for the dog and 2 for the cat. It's so much fun to later decide where each one will be placed. For heat embossing, transparent embossing powder by Sizzix is used today. It was a surprise to discover that this powder is even finer than the one from Ranger. The result is beautiful and it's easy to work with. With transparent embossing powder, a raised glossy edge can be created on any color of ink, as long as the ink stays wet long enough. VaessenCreative also sells this super handy reverse tweezers. They hold tight when you release them and open when you press. Ideal for holding paper while heat embossing. For melting the powder, a heat tool is used. The advantage of heat embossing is the neat and crisp result. The raised glossy line also makes it much easier to color within the lines. Stop heating as soon as the powder has melted. If you keep heating for too long, the raised line will sink into the paper and the effect will be lost. Look, this tweezer is so strong that it stays in place even when you let go. I find it ideal and indispensable in my craft room. I will need a small strip for the text later, and there is still some space left at the top of the paper, so I will cut off exactly ½ centimeter. That is where I will stamp the text later. First I will continue with the stencil. I cut out the present and on top of it I place the star stencil. I secure it again with the magnets, but you can also use tape for this. Again, using the stress oxide lumberjack plate and the large blending brush, I apply ink to the paper. Blend the ink on top of the present. It does not matter that you go over all the lines, because we will color it later, and of course cut it out. Try not to make the color too intense. It might seem like there's almost no color yet, but believe me, even when you think the paper still looks white, there's already a light layer of color on it. It is better to check a few times and add more ink later than to apply too much in one go and end up with a very dark pattern. It also looks beautiful when you apply a little more ink at the bottom of the present, so you get a nice gradient from dark to light. With the same red ink, we will now color the bow using a water brush. By coloring with distress oxide, you can paint opaquely over the red stars that were already made with the stencil. And another advantage of oxide ink is that it is slightly chalky, which gives the bow a soft, velvety effect. Apply several layers and try to create lighter and darker areas. Wipe with a clean brush from light to dark to achieve or enhance that effect. Do not stir the ink on the palette. If you stir, the ink mixes with water and becomes thinner. You want the ink to stay as thick as possible. You can make it lighter on the paper by spreading it out. We will color the dog and the cat with distress ink. This ink is transparent and more vibrant than distress oxide, which gives a livelier result. I use a Tombow water brush with a fine tip. There's already water inside the brush, and I do not squeeze it. I use the colors lumberjack plate, gather twigs and ground espresso. Usually I pick up a quick swipe of ink and apply it quite thickly. As the ink in the brush runs out, the color becomes lighter, and I use that to color the lighter areas. For larger light parts, I stir the brush just a little in the ink to get a softer tone. As you can see, I start with the cutest parts of the figures, such as the cheeks and the tongue. I also color the little toes red. When changing colors, I rinse the brush and dab it dry on a piece of kitchen paper. The color Gather Twigs looks darker than ground espresso on the palette, which is confusing. But on the paper it's lighter, so I apply that one first. First the patterns in the fur of the cat and dog, again from dark to light. Then I add the color ground espresso on top as a new layer. I start again on the darkest areas, the parts that are further back or where shadows fall. The muzzle becomes rounded by making the edges darker than the center. With a clean brush I wipe from light to dark. With some water I let the color blend out. The white areas should not stay white, but can become light pink or light brown. That is why I pick up some red ink with the brush and apply it along the edge of the cat's head, letting it blend softly into the brown. Very gently I let that color flow into all the white parts of the cat's face. Sometimes I make small circular movements to spread the color that is already absorbed into the paper. With another layer of ground espresso, I add more texture to the fur pattern. You can apply as many layers as you like. When the paper is dry, you can even draw fine hairlines in the fur. I also draw some small strokes on the paws to create the effect of tiny hairs. For the dog's snout and forehead, I first apply a light pink base and then go over it with a very diluted brown. Sometimes I wait before adding the next layer to let the paper dry. That prevents the colors from bleeding too much and helps you make sharper lines. If you want those lines to blend, go over them with a clean brush and make small circular movements. I also add some red over certain parts of the brown layers on the dog, just like with the cat. This makes it look cuter and brings the color to life a little more. I hope these instructions are helpful for you. Please let me know in the description if they were useful for you. We go back to the present. In the meantime, this has dried. Using a jelly roll pen number 10 by Sakura, we will now add highlights. Just draw a few lines along the edges of the bow. Not completely at the edge, but leaving a tiny bit of red showing. Add small lines at the top of the bow to make it look as if the light hits there. Also draw a line on the knot and one at the bottom of the ribbon. The dog and cat also get highlights. Maybe you do not like to add as many highlights as I do, but definitely add a white dot to the pupils. It makes the eyes sparkle beautifully. A little white line on the nose makes it even cuter. I also add a white line inside the dog's nose. Even though I already left that spot white, it somehow looks better with the gel pen. I also draw small strokes above the eyebrows, inside the ears, and 3 white dots on the red cheeks. So cute! To add extra little hairs on the paws, I draw white strokes where the darker ink transitions into the lighter ink. I do this in the direction of the hair growth. Look what happens to Odey after adding just a few highlights. Not difficult at all. The kitten becomes much softer with all those white hairs, all following in the direction of the fur. If I find some strokes too thick, or if I change my mind, I simply remove them with a water brush filled with only water. The gel pen comes off easily that way. If the white lines fade or turn brown or red, It means you did not wait long enough for the ink to dry. Just wait a little longer and add new white lines over them. Time to cut! When cutting, keep your scissors straight and turn the paper with your other hand. Cut as slowly as possible, aiming to place the blades right next to the black stamped line. We want to keep that beautiful embossed line visible. Cut tricky areas like the little hairs on top roughly first and trim them neatly later. Only use the middle part of your scissors and try not to use the tip unless you really have to. For difficult spots, it can sometimes look best if you use a craft knife to cut them out. The cat's whiskers can give you a bit of a dilemma. You can simply cut them off, which is easiest, and honestly anyone who does not know they should be there will not miss them. Or with a lot of patience, you can carefully cut out the tiny white spaces between the whiskers, just like you did with the hairs on top of the head. The cat's paws are a bit fluffier and the dog's paws are a little smoother. But the nice thing is, you can make them however your own creativity tells you to. On the background, which is now dry, we also add highlights. On the top edges of all the letters of the word Merry Christmas, I draw tiny lines or dots. That means the letter M gets 3 highlights and the letter E just 1. Do you see how the letters suddenly look more rounded and shiny? If you still see a few spots of blue here and there, you can cover them with a bit of white gel pen. No one will ever notice later. It will be a shaker card, of course, so small imperfections will not show. We do the same for the other card. I will add an extra text to both of the cards. The sentiment stamps have enough options to find one that matches. If you place the stamp on your work mat and align it straight, you can easily pick it up with a clear block. Make sure you align it with the lines on the clear block, and when you stamp again, look at those lines to aim and stamp straight. For the additional text Een warme kerstknuffel, a warm Christmas hug, I already cut a piece of paper that measures 5 cm by 2.5 cm. Also here I used the stamping tricks by watching the lines on the work mat and the clear block, as well as the edges of the paper. That way the sentiment falls exactly in the middle of the strip. The reverse tweezers help me add the transparent embossing powder onto the wet ink and let me heat emboss without burning my fingers. Now we can make the seamless shaker cards and finally assemble the cards. What you need is a plastic sleeve that we normally use to sell or store our cards in. Inside it you place the card panel we just created. Do not worry if the card panel is smaller than the sleeve. We will make it fit. First cut off the top edge if the plastic is too long, but keep a distance of 2 inches or at least 4 centimeters for the closure. Place the panel in one corner of the sleeve, then turn it upside down and now fold over the edge that sticks out and tape it to the back of the panel. In the top part, which is still open, we can now add the shaker material. This is the confetti by Nellie's Choice, my favorite. Make sure the shaker material stays in the front part of the card. If some ends up at the back, it is not a big problem, but you can always take it out and start again. Do not add too much, just a little is enough for a nice effect. Turn the panel back around and tape the top closed with regular tape. Do it just like you would when wrapping a present, but make sure the paper does not bulge. I do the same with the other card panel. And here I use the blue confetti. So for the blue background I use red confetti, and for the red background I use blue confetti. But if you combine it with yellow or green confetti, you will also get a very cheerful result. The shaker panel can now be attached to a folded base card. It works best with double-sided tape, or with what I use here, the Maxi Power Tape by Tombow. That roller is ideal to use. The tape sticks firmly to the paper and also very well to plastic. When attaching the shaker card, start from the fold line. Hold the shaker card at an angle and only lower it once you see that it lines up nicely with the fold. So before you stick it down, make sure you start on the correct side, because once it is stuck, it is really stuck. The cutout figures can now be glued in place. By using 3D foam pads, you can easily attach them and give the card some extra depth. Here you can really play with your creativity and arrange them however you like. The dog or cat can come out of the present box or sit behind it with the lid on or off. By placing some parts higher or lower, you can create even more depth. It is also fun to glue the lid slightly at an angle. I use double foam pads on the parts that touch the plastic and a single one on the part that overlaps the box. Under the box there is already one foam pad, so together that adds up to 2. If you only use one layer of foam pads on the bow and overlap it with the box, it will not lie flat but rather look a bit uneven. The paws look best if you glue them halfway onto the box or the lid. That way it really looks like they are holding it. Such a fun part to move around and experiment with. On the other card I did not add the box, only the little dog. And as you can see, it looks lovely this way. Perfect for any occasion. I already feel like making another one of these cards. With stencils you can quickly and easily decorate the envelope. I will do this on the back flap. This card base is one I still had left from last Christmas when I stamped stars on it. They match perfectly with the star stencil. Using a piece of masking tape I cover the front of the envelope. Place the tape wherever you do not want ink to go. If you position the stencil diagonally across the flap, you can cover the entire flap beautifully. Choose the one of the same colors you used on the card, so it will always match. And I'm going for the red ink again. There's still enough ink left on the brush to give a nice light shade. And to create a smooth gradient, I add a bit more ink to the bottom edge of the flap. With circular motions I blend from bottom to top, avoiding the top part because I want to keep that area light. It is so much easier with brushes than with blending foams, which can get stuck behind the sharp corners or leave marks. Whenever you pick up new ink on the brush, always start again at the spot where you want it darkest and fade it out towards lighter areas. This gives such a wonderful effect. I honestly would not mind making 50 of these. It is always such a nice surprise when you lift the stencil off, and so relaxing to do. What kind of card would you like to make next? Let me know in the comments. You can find more inspiration in my other YouTube videos and also on my social media channels like Facebook, Pinterest and Instagram. And remember, you can achieve beautiful results with simple materials. Thanks for watching! Bye bye!